Hi everyone, Elizabeth here. Today I wanted to do a tag video. Today's video is the favorite quotes tag. I was tagged by Isaiah at That Reading Guy, and I really enjoyed his video a lot. I thought it was really thoughtful and really interesting, and I was very glad to have watched it. So if you haven't seen it, I recommend you go check it out. And the tag was originally created by Sailing Through Books, which was a new YouTube channel to me. So I was very happy to find her as well. I'm sorry if my voice is a little bit weak. I'm having some sort of semi sore throat. But I really wanted to get to this tag just because I really enjoyed the questions. So I think mine won't be quite as good as many of the others that have been posted just because I'm not a big quotes person. But I wanted to participate and spread the tag around. So question number one is what's a quote you return to in hard times? What about it comforts you? Um, and the quote that immediately jumped into mind, which is probably one of the only quotes I really do return to mentally pretty often, is an excerpt from a short story by Karen Blixen, who you may know better as Isaac Denison. That was her pen name. And the quote is, "What is man when you come to think upon him, but a minutely set ingenious machine for turning, with infinite artfulness, the red wine of Shiraz into urine? You may even ask which is the more intense craving and pleasure, to drink or to make water. But in the meantime, what has been done? A song has been composed, a kiss taken, a slanderer slain, a prophet begotten, a righteous judgment given, a joke made." And what I really like about this quote is it does a good job at encapsulating sort of the duality of man, I guess, that at bottom we are all animals. We are still connected to our animal nature, and we are base in a certain way. We still, mostly make water, sleep, eat, and those sorts of things. And one can sort of fall into a kind of depression about that, well, what are we other than just glorified animals walking on our hind legs? But I think that's what's interesting about the quote, is that it shows that even while we participate in these base things, many of which might themselves be ugly or beautiful in different ways, what else are we doing? Well, we're doing a lot else. We're singing songs, we're kissing, we're slaying slanderers, and so on. And I've always sort of liked this quote. It brings me comfort because it reminds me that we live in a sort of multifarious universe, and we ourselves are multifarious. And whether we're making water or eating a hamburger or whatever, there's always this sort of gear work that's going on up inside, upstairs. And there's always a lot more going on than may seem is going on. And I just love that contrast between turning the wine of Shiraz into urine, because after all, where does the wine of Shiraz come from? That's another human production. And so just encapsulated in that first part, I think, is so much of interest. And it is kind of a quote that I do return to over and over again whenever one feels that we are so limited. It reminds me that in many ways we are fantastic creatures, every one of us. And so I really like that quote. It's from a short story. And what I also think is interesting is I remember absolutely nothing about this short story. I know I read it. I don't remember what it's about or anything, but this quote stuck out to me so much that I read it just once and I still remember it, and I return to it frequently. So for number two, a quote or two that sums up your philosophy of life. I have two, and the first one is more sort of aspirational, I suppose, and the second one is one that really expresses, I think, how I always have felt my entire life. So the first one is from Latin, "Homo sum, humani nihil a me alienum puto." I did take one semester of Latin, but I've forgotten how to pronounce it at this point. But it means I am human, and nothing that is human is alien to me. And that's from a play by Terence. And that's sort of if I had to have one sort of motto, that would be my motto: nothing human is alien to me. I think in this day and age, we're so quick to dismiss people. If someone says the wrong thing, if someone, sort of expresses something that's even a little bit different from, what we're used to or what we ourselves believe, there's this tendency to sort of just throw that person away. They're horrible, or how could they think that, or sort of leap to these conclusions. And I think the idea that, that person is also a human, and, they're not alien. They're very much like you. What burns inside of them is very much what burns inside of you. And I really believe in that idea of trying to take an extra moment to understand, even in cases where it's very difficult to understand. And so I try to extend myself in that way whenever I can, as much as I can, to understand rather than to condemn. And I don't mean that only for in a negative sense. I mean, it can be difficult to understand why people have sort of heinous beliefs, but at the same time, I think also sometimes we dehumanize people we admire too much as well. So for instance, if someone's a genius, we just assume, oh, well, they're a genius, or whatever, as if it comes easily to them, or nothing counts because they're a genius. Everything is, the whole world is set out at their feet. I think there's a way in which you can kind of dismiss people accidentally in both directions. And so I think whether you sort of idolize someone or whether you condemn someone, I think both are mistaken. And ideally, we should believe that we can bring ourselves to at least try to empathize, try to understand other human beings and remember their humanity, rather than sort of immediately, just sort of trying to gather around ourselves those who are in our in-group or whatever, and exclude those who are out because of whatever contravening of our sacred cows they've done. So and that's aspirational. I think that's very difficult to do depending on what your particular buttons are. And, everyone has them, and so do I. And so it can be a very difficult thing to do when someone says something or acts in a way that you just simply, it's not so much that you dislike it, but you simply can't understand it. Why are you doing this? And so I try to remember that always, that other people are not aliens. They're human, just as human as all too human, one might say. And then the other sort of quote that has always, I think, been true for me in a very deep way, and that's sort of related, is from Kant. So act as to treat humanity, whether in your own person or in that of any other, in every case as an end, never as a means only. I first read Kant when I was in graduate school, and it struck me like lightning. And it wasn't that I had realized something, but it was more that someone had articulated something that I'd always believed, that other people are not, we shouldn't treat other people like a transaction, that people are as much human as we are, and that ideally one should take in the whole person, their flaws, their attributes included, and we should not see people merely as means for ourselves to get ahead or to get what we want. And I think Kant and sort of deontology in general are a lot less popular these days compared to utilitarianism. And I would not say that I'm totally a deontologist, and I generally avoid sort of committing myself to any particular philosophical precepts, but this is one that I can say that I sort of wholeheartedly have taken on, and I think have always sort of felt inside, really. And reading Kant was really quite a revelation for me, and it's something that I've continued to ponder since I first read him. So a quote you love because it's beautifully written. Now, this was difficult because there's a lot of beautiful writing in the world. But what occurred to me was a particular quote, rather short, from Ulysses, one of my favorite books. And it's when our hero, our Ulysses, Leopold Bloom, goes to a bathhouse in order to take a bath. And it says, "Enjoy a bath now, clean trough of water, cool enamel, the gentle tepid stream. This is my body. He foresaw his pale body reclined in it at full, in the bath, naked in a womb of warmth, oiled by scented melting soap, softly laved. He saw his trunk and limbs rippled over and sustained, buoyed lightly upward, lemon yellow, his navel, bud of flesh, and saw the dark tangled curls of his bush floating hair of the stream around the limp father of thousands, a languid floating flower. And I just have to say that is the most pleasant description of male genitalia that I have ever read. And I think the reason I chose that is because I think with sufficient skill, you can make almost anything beautiful, right? I've never sort of read a description of a flaccid penis as a languid floating flower, the limp father of thousands, and yet it's so true. And I think that generally that's a very beautiful thing. It can be dangerous sometimes, right, if we romanticize the wrong things. But I think that shows a mark of an amazing skill to be able to look at things with new eyes, things that are generally overlooked. And it's just so Joycean in the way that I love, that sort of human touch that he has. He's so deeply humane. He's so deeply a lover of people, of all our flaws included, all our whole bodies included. And it's such a Joycean quote that's another reason that I chose it. The next question is a poem you've memorized and why you chose to memorize it. So I chose Dylan Thomas's Do Not Go Gentle Into That Good Night, which I memorized because it's a villanelle, and I'd never really seen that in any other poem. I've never really seen that structure before. So it's, I think, 3 tercets. So 3 stanzas of 3. Oh no, it's 4. Okay, 1, 2, 3, or 5. It's a number of tercets followed by a quatrain. And I guess I'll talk about it more after I've read it. So I'm going to read it out here just because the moment I try to recite, I'm sure, is the moment that I will forget everything I've learned. So the poem is, do not go gentle into that good night. Old age should burn and rave at close of day. Rage, rage against the dying of the light. Though wise men at their end know dark is right, because their words have forked no lightning, they do not go gentle into that good night. Good men, the last wave by, crying how bright their frail deeds might have danced in a green bay. Rage, rage against the dying of the light. Wild men who cotton sang the sun in flight, and learned too late they grieved it on its way, do not go gentle into that good night. Grave men near death who see with blinding sight, blind eyes could blaze like meteors and be gay. Rage, rage against the dying of the light. And you, my father, there on the sad height, curse, bless me now with your fierce tears, I pray. Do not go gentle into that good night. Rage, rage against the dying of the light. There are several things I really loved about this poem and why I memorized it. One is the surprise ending in that quatrain, that we go from sort of this general analysis of the different types of men, what kind of lives they lead, and how all of them nevertheless should fight against the inevitable dying of the light. And then suddenly at the end we get, and you, my father, there on the sad height. And suddenly it becomes very personal. It's the author speaking directly to his father. And there's something about there on the sad height. It gives you this image that we're all sort of climbing up, or at least I get this image that we're all sort of climbing up to this sort of cliff face. And at some point you reach the sad height and you're alone. And that's when you confront your mortality. And so I sort of get this image of Dylan Thomas looking up at his father up on the sad height. And I think I get that because of the use of the sad height, not a sad height. It's as if this is the life journey that we all go through, the sad height. It's known to all of us. And that is the case with mortality, right? We all know that we're mortal. We all know that we'll die. Some of us are in denial about it Some of us try not to think about it, but we all know it deep inside that we are mortal and we will die. And so I always sort of like that payoff at the end of the poem, that it's sort of building. It's building as you go through all the different types of men, and then you get to the ultimate real reason for this poem, which is Dylan Thomas's father was dying. And the curse bless me now with your fierce tears is the same. It's the idea that you have to say goodbye. You knew you were going to have to say goodbye. It's a curse and it's a blessing in a way, as so many of these sort of natural milestones that we go through are. It's bittersweet. I say sweet because we can't live forever, or at least that's my feeling, is we wouldn't actually want to be immortal. If you really sat there and you really thought about it, you wouldn't actually want to be immortal. And so it's sort of bittersweet in a way. Curse bless me now with your fierce tears. And the other thing I really like about this poem, or I've always liked, is that it admits that death is inevitable. Wise men at their end, who see with blinding sights, I'm sorry, see, this is who know that, who at their end know that dark is right, is what I meant. They know it because they're wise men, and they're not in any, they're not mistaken. They don't think that raging against the dying of the light is actually going to win. I don't think any of these example men do, but it's important to fight it anyway. I like the feeling of defiance that's in this. It's not a passive sort of drifting away. It's a very active way to be, to fight against the dying of the light, despite its inevitability, despite the sun setting, despite your knowing that it's going to happen. Nevertheless, you try to squeeze out all the life you can, and it's just so human to fight against something that you know you can't win. And so I really like this as a sort of meditation on, it's not a meditation on one's own mortality, is part of what's interesting about it. It's a meditation that on what can often be more painful, which is the mortality of our loved ones, right? Somehow we can handle our own mortality sometimes more easily than we can handle the mortality of those we love. It's harder to watch someone else up there on the sad height than maybe it is to stand on the sad height yourself in some ways. And so that's why I really like that poem. And it's one of those that has such a good rhythm to it that the lines kind of pop into your head over and over again. Next is a quote that captures how you feel about love or friendship. I chose a poem by E.E. Cummings, but I think I realized that I actually don't want to read it aloud because it's so much of this poem is about the typography that I feel that to really understand the poem, it has to be read and seen, not heard. So I'm going to put on the screen right now the poem, and you can pause and feel free to take time reading it. I think it has an interesting look to it, actually. So here's the poem. So I hope you had a read. To me, this is just the quintessential love poem. I read this first when I was 18, and particularly that last stanza, those last couple of lines, here's the deepest secret nobody knows, the root of the root and the bud of the bud. That instantly became lodged right in my heart. The root of the root and the bud of the bud, there's something so true about that. And when I read this poem, one of the reasons I didn't want to read it is because I actually kind of hear two voices in the poem. One is sort of the external voice, and then the one that's in the parentheses is sort of the interior voice, kind of, in my mind, it's sort of speaking sub rosa and a little bit overlapping with the first voice. That the two voices are sort of speaking together in a somewhat overlapping manner. And there's something beautiful about that, because I kind of feel like something like love is very, very difficult to articulate, and it's kind of the poet's charged to try as much as he can to articulate the inarticulatable. And I think I really like how E. E. Cummings approaches that, because the way that it has that repetition, the way that it has the parentheses, is somewhat of an articulation of the fact that these are not things that these are not things that we can actually express in words. It's sort of like these are the words that occur to us as we're feeling them. A lot of the poetry I think has somewhat of a very rhythmical quality, in the sense that it's not. I think that's why I really liked Gawain and the Green Knight. There's something about there's sort of a chanting a feeling to it. I carry your heart with me. I carry it in my heart. I carry your heart with me. I carry it in my heart. That I really like about the poems that most strike me. So that's why I really like that one, and it moved me so much that I only needed to see it once, and sort of forever after that. I always thought of love in this way, the deepest secret that no one knows. I mean, that is, to me, sort of what love is. It's sort of what love feels like. It feels like this sort of secret that you carry with you. Not that you're trying to keep it a secret, but it's something that's so internal that you can't really express it. It's just the root of the root and the bud of the bud. And I really think that line is one of the most beautiful lines of poetry ever that I've ever read for me. So, a quote that makes you feel seen. I had two, and I think I'll read the first one. I'll actually read the one I thought I would do second first, because it sort of relates to what I was just talking about. But this is actually a line from Madame Bovary, so it's in translation, and so it's sort of funny that I love this line so much. But it says, human speech is like a cracked kettle on which we beat out tunes for bears to dance to when we long to inspire pity in the stars. That's how I feel very much about when I try to write or when I try to speak, right? You have this sort of glowing ball right inside, and you're trying so hard to communicate it, and when it comes out, it's just a cracked kettle for bears to dance to. And I like... I like the raw honesty of that, and it's ironically so true. It's so well said, and I think it does express something that we feel. So I like that quote. And for another quote, it's an excerpt from Orlando by Virginia Woolf, and it's just this very short passage that sort of flies by in passing. It's not really about anything that Orlando is about, but it really struck me when I read it. So it says, she rose, but without precipitation, called her dogs, and went firmly but with great alertness of movement down the staircase and out into the garden. Here the shadows of the plants were miraculously distinct. She noticed the separate grains of earth in the flower beds as if she had a microscope stuck to her eye. She saw the intricacy of the twigs of every tree. Each blade of grass was distinct, and the marking of veins and petals. She saw Stubbs, the gardener, coming along the path, and every button on his gaiters was visible. She saw Betty and Prince, the cart horses, and never had she marked so clearly the white star on Betty's forehead, and the 3 long hairs that fell down below the rest on Prince's tail. Out in the quadrangle, the old gray walls of the house looked like a scraped new photograph. She heard the loudspeaker condensing on the terrace a dance tune that people were listening to in the Red Velvet Opera House at Vienna. This excerpt struck me because it reminded me so entirely of those moments in life when things seem to just pause for a moment, and you can suddenly sort of examine the live moment that you're in as if time has stopped. And it's a very rare and noteworthy moments, these few moments that happen in life. And for me, it specifically reminded me of the very first time I sort of was in a very rural setting when there was a full moon. I grew up in sort of suburb. It wasn't a suburb, I suppose. I grew up in a city, I guess I would say. And so the full moon was never... I never really understood what was the mystique with the full moon. I mean, it looks nice, I suppose, but There was one night, long, long ago now, when I was sort of driving in the middle of nowhere in New Hampshire, and it was a full moon, and the moon was like, it created a completely different landscape around me. I'd never witnessed this before. And I got out of the car and with my partner, and we went into sort of this empty field that we saw. And we just got out of the car. We just looked around, and it was as if everything around was sort of gilded with silver. It almost looked like everything was black and white. You literally couldn't see any colors. And it was strange. It was like being in an old silver screen movie. And so we just sort of stood around, sort of laughing, and it was sort of eerie and beautiful. And you just sort of stand there, and you can see all the details of everything around you, every blade of grass, every sort of hair falling over your face, everything. You just look at your hands. You can't believe sort of what you're seeing, and it's almost as if you're seeing with a different sight. And that was one of those moments when everything sort of really stopped, and you can see all the detail. The second I read this, it reminded me of that kind of experience, even though she's not actually in moonlight or anything in this. But I think I also chose it because it's sort of representative of what I find really interesting in writing, which is these deeply subjective experiences that only you can experience, that you experience alone in some way, whether people are with you or not, because they're so entirely internal and in some ways so incommunicable, and yet it's those incommunicable, sort of ineffable experiences that can be the most significant. And so I find it very interesting when writing can explore that sort of these very internal states that we go through. The idea that these things that are both so supremely personal can also very often be like an experience that many people have gone through, despite its remaining always completely unique to yourself. That sort of interests me, and I think that informs like the kinds of books that I really truly deeply connect with and enjoy reading. So I thought that was an interesting one. And again, it's from Orlando, but it really has nothing to do with the rest of the book. It's just that struck me when I was reading it. And lastly, we have a quote you'd want read at your funeral. To be honest, I couldn't think of anything right on the spot, and I didn't come across anything that seemed interesting, and it just seemed too flippant to just kind of try to fill in the blank. I think if I ever come across anything that I want read at my funeral, I'll mark it, and I'll make sure to keep in mind that that's something that I would want read at my funeral. But I couldn't see anything off the bat that interested me as something I would want read at my funeral. So unfortunately, I'm just gonna have to skip that one. But anyway, I hope you guys are all having a great day. I'm sorry again about my voice being a little bit weak. And yeah, I hope that if any of you are interested in this tag, please do it. I'll leave some tagged people below. And yeah, I'll see you in the next one. So bye-bye.